bum, da da da, bum ba dum bum bum, da da da. Welcome to the Visionary Voice. I'm Lori DeGardi, and today I have Alison Pena with us. Alison is a consultant, speaker, and blogger. She lives in New York City. She's a self-proclaimed bad widow and enjoys opening up provocative, vulnerable conversations about loss, human communication, and connection to expand understanding and inspire global change. She is fearlessly committed to life and helping others thrive on their own terms, especially since her husband's death in 2016. Welcome, Alison.
Thank you so much for having me, Lori.
You're welcome. I'm excited to open up provocative and vulnerable conversations with you. What does leading with personal power look like in your life?
So leading with personal power means really honoring what I know is the next thing that needs to be said, because my brand and what I do has so much to do with transparency and vulnerability. It's a question of what's next. So, for example, I was on Facebook the other day, and someone asked, what would your first reaction be to someone saying to you, I want to be intimate with you? And people said vulnerable, brave, this, that, the other thing, all wonderful. And I said no. To everybody else, she said, oh, that's wonderful. And to me, she said, why? And it was fascinating to me, because what I realized is that when we as women, and I think it is more women, say no, we justify it or we explain it afterwards. And it gets taken pretty often as a maybe. And so I'm about to do a challenge called Just Say No. So it's really following my voice wherever I see it takes me in this transparent, vulnerable path. And a lot of times that is down the path of loss and grief. And there's power there. Because as a widow, I can say and go almost anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I have been through it myself. And so with complete compassion and vulnerability, I can also kick someone into motion again.
What I heard you say is I heard a bunch of things there. Leading with personal power is showing up in the mystery in the moment. And sometimes that moment needs a no, and that no is enough. There's no defending it, no explaining it, there's no why, because you're trusting what's coming up for you in that moment. It can be off-putting for other people.
It can be very off-putting for other people. And in fact, it is how my husband and I lived the last 11 months of his life. The doctor said, stop doing everything. You need to just rest and take your time. And we decided to do it a different way. We decided that because his time was finite, and he had pancreatic cancer, so the time frame for that is typically 6 weeks to 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
So we now had a clear end date for him. And the doctor said, relax and stop. And we said, no, we are going to start knocking things off our bucket list. We are going to live more fully and love more fully than we ever have in our whole life. And honestly, if we had had the 25 years we were together with that commitment to love that we had in that last 11 months, we would have had a way different marriage.
Mm. What I hear you say too is that no, or showing up in that mystery each moment, is a really big fat yes to your own self, whatever that looks like.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Because if it's a half-hearted no, you're never going to give a wholehearted yes.
Yes. This reminds me of a dialogue I had in the last month or two with a coach of mine. And we were going back and forth as coaching clients do. And I was talking about creating heaven on earth. And what I'm hearing you talk about is creating heaven on earth. And I said to him, there's a lot of hell no's in creating heaven on earth, because you only want to say hell yes. If it is not a big, fat, juicy, delicious yes to your heart's desire or your soul longing or to whatever that mystery is calling for in the moment, then it's a hell no. That's how you create heaven on earth. Yeah. So I'm resonating with that when you share that with me. And having that with your husband in the last months of his life, and he lived longer than his prognosis even.
Yes, he lived 11 months, and the oncologist said, whatever you're doing, keep doing it, because it's you, it's not me.
Yeah.
So despite the fact that they said, they kept saying no to us. No, don't keep living life full out. No, he can't die at home. He died at home in my arms on 4 breaths with just the 2 of us.
Mm-hmm.
No hospice, no nothing. Exactly as we wanted it to go, if he had to go at all. Right at the end, they said, you might not be able to handle this. And I looked at them and I said, you have no idea what I can handle. You have no idea. And so when we as visionaries and as visionary voices, when we step into, you have no idea what I can handle. And it's not actually for you to say what I can handle. Yeah.
Yes.
So,
No, I feel like I want to get up, and when you're talking about that, because you're so right. You decide
yes.
what you can handle. You decide what you want to handle. You decide what's worth handling. You decide what gets a hell no or a hell yes. You decide.
Exactly.
To me, that is leading with personal power. Yeah.
Yes. And the important thing about loss is when we go through a loss, and it can be a loss of a person, but it can also be other losses. Mm-hmm. It can be a loss of a job. It can be a loss of a home. It can be a loss of a pet. It can be any kind of loss breaks us in a certain way. And we have to come back to whole, right? And so what I found after Dave died is that people didn't necessarily know how to proactively come back to whole. And so because there were not tools and there were not actually honest conversations happening about this, there were conversations after the fact. There were very cerebral conversations. And if you look at my blog in the beginning, and I started writing this the January after he died, they're rough posts. They were from right inside of the pain. But what's happened is people from all around the world have said, oh my gosh, yes, that is the way it is. And so they connect and they know that I get it because I've clearly been through it, and I've been willing to talk about that experience too, about not being all put together.
Yes. Well, and grief is not something that I find is, not the word celebrated, but I'm going to use that word. It's not celebrated here in the Western world as much as it is other places. I've worked a lot in the past in East Africa and Uganda, and and they bury a lot of people there, and all ages, your children, your just too many people. And when I go to a funeral, people wailed, and there was no hiding their grief. It was full out. Everybody shared in it, and there was a really powerful healing quality to sharing that deep grief. And to me, it was just another form of love.
Yes.
It was just expressed differently because of the loss. So I understand what you're saying from that aspect. And when I moved to Tucson 2.5 years ago, I grieved for at least a solid year. And a lot of the times I was in bed crying because I stripped myself of all of my identity. I moved across the country, right? So I had to find what that hole was. I have found an experience to be so true with death and with other types of losses. It's really important work. I'm so glad to hear that you're doing this. It's really moving to me. Yeah. And thanks. You're welcome. And what about Alison? When was there a time in your life where you weren't showing up to the moment ready to say yes or no, or that you weren't leading with personal power? What did that look like?
Well, I was working as a medical editor, liaising between an advertising firm and a pharmaceutical firm. And I was about to turn 50, and I asked myself if this was what I was meant to be doing for the rest of my life. And it was a hell no. I mean, I honestly felt like I was dying every single day. And and it was terrifying because it was a safe, secure job. It was more money than I'd made before. So every reasonable person was saying, stay there. This is life. This is what you're meant to be doing. And then my heart was calling me to do something very different. And so the years I stayed doing that, I was not in my personal power.
Mm-hmm.
And then the year I stepped and I said, okay, I don't necessarily know what I'm meant to do, because I'd so buried my own heart that I'd almost forgotten my vision. And so I had to leap out like a phoenix and really break this idea, which I never subscribed to. I mean, I don't find jobs that safe and secure these days.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no passion to it.
But there was this sense that there was something more for you.
Yes.
And you said you were dying a slow death. So there was this loss involved, and that purpose or your vision, it's so strong in all of us. It never goes away. It's there when we're born. It'll be there when we die. But what we do with it is up to us. And it'll always tug on us, always.
Yes.
And it sounds like that tug became unbearable for you. So what was the pivot point? What happened that made you say, yes, I have to honor my vision and my heart. Life has to be different? Because I know a lot of women who have these visions, and they too love the money they're making in the corporate world, the habits, their identity, the expectations. So what was it that made you pivot?
Well, I was turning 50, and my grandfather lived to 99. So it was literally, I was at the half point of my life. I didn't want to leave the legacy of, well, she went to work, and she read some ad copy, and she helped, put more pharmaceutical drugs out there into the public eye. Mm-hmm. And this was not my legacy. I mean, ever since I was a tiny child, I've just seen people truly and stood for them. That's what I do. That's who I've been since I was 6. And I had smothered that for a while. And then it was impossible. It actually, the pain became so great that I had no choice. And I had a lot of conversations with some people in my family when this happened, because I was in a safe, secure job. Mm-hmm. So I was doing what they thought I should be doing. And in the end, I had to follow my own truth as opposed to continuing to go along. Visionaries, at some point, they stop going along.
Yeah. Otherwise, you're sacrificing yourself at the altar of social consciousness. And visionaries and social consciousness, they may merge, or you can use social consciousness to support your vision.
Right.
But you can't give it up you can, but as you said, it's a slow death. And so there's that time for you where it was like what you could see as a halfway point in your life. That was the first half. What's the second life? And I know it must have taken a lot of courage to bust through the old paradigm of this is what life looks like.
Yes.
That's a big, that's a big monster that looks you in the face, and you just have to look that monster down. Because you said you had a lot of pain, and that reminds me of Malidoma Somé is a West African elder. He's a shaman. He's got a couple PhDs, a couple master's degrees. He's from Burkina Faso, and I've spent time with him over the years in the past. And he says that his Dagara tradition from West Africa says that everyone is born with a healing gift to give it to the world. And when you're in his indigenous village, everybody knows what that is because they communicate with the spirit of the child before it's born. The name is honoring of that gift. And so the community supports that child to enhance that gift. So when the child becomes an adult, it can give that gift to the community. But in the West, we don't do that, right? If you don't give your healing gift to the world, life is going to continue to try to crack you open so that healing gift will be released. So if you are, feeling like you're dying, like you were every day, life is trying to crack you open because you're here for that vision. You're here to give that healing gift to the world. And sometimes, and it took me a lot of hammers over the head to crack me open. Now I give it willingly. Now it's like, oh my gosh, this is my bread and butter. This is the juicy nectar of life. This is my sweet spot. This is my joy. And I get that you always knew you had this ability to, you didn't say go to bat for the person, but you could see them. And
I see them truly, and I stand for them.
Yes. And so tell me, how do you do that now? What does that look like in your work or your day-to-day experience?
What I created before my husband was sick was something called the Affluence Code. And what I discovered is that everybody basically sees through 3 lenses. And they have all of them, but you need to spend 60% of your time in whatever is your primary one to have a seamless life, to have life be easy, to live it on your terms and get the results fast and furious. And I used this when Dave was sick. So Reader's Digest. First is purpose, which is doing impeccable work, like executing impeccable work. The second is love, which is nurturing one-on-one relationships. And the third is charity, which is serving a thriving ecosystem. We've all got all of them, right? My husband was purpose, love, charity. That means nurture one-on-one relationships to do impeccable work. So he painted until the Thursday before the Saturday he died in my arms. Lucid, talking, working, 2 days before he died at home. I'm charity, so I'm charity, love, purpose. So I needed to lean on my community, and I got so good at actually asking for what we needed and being really, really crystal clear that what we needed to be held and supported and nurtured in all different ways. I got so clear about saying it that people knew that they were giving me exactly what I needed. People don't give you what you want, because if you're not clear, they don't want to get it wrong.
Yes, that's a great point. Yeah.
Especially if you're a widow, especially if you're a caregiver, they very often won't act because they don't want to get it wrong. So if you get to the point where you're crystal clear and your asking is so precise that it's a win-win and there's no obligation.
And getting crystal clear can be a challenge for some people, a lot of people in a situation where there are heavy emotions and there is traumatic circumstances. A lot of people they're not grounded in their body, and it's hard to be clear with anything. So do you also offer services, or do you help people get to that point where they can be clear? Like you were very clear when you needed that from your community.
Yeah, so I do consulting, I speak, I have little products. I've been started to do challenges. So I just finished a challenge called From Pain to Peace, how to get present and become more resourceful by using your 5 senses. I took a sense each day and I did practices to get people in their body, because you're right, people jump out. When they're in real pain, they jump out.
Yes. And I don't know about you, but for sure for me, that was a practice to get grounded. And what I know about visionaries is even if you don't have trauma in your life, you have these lofty visions and you have other worldly experiences. Somehow, this is what you can tell me if this is true for you, but the visionaries I've interviewed and some I speak to that I haven't interviewed, like we've always known there's something more than meets the eye. And we long for that. And then we have these lofty visions, and it's hard to bring all of that down to earth, but we have to function through this body. We can only bring those big visions to life through this body, through our heart, and living in the head and not being clear on any of that is not going to honor your vision or that gift in the world or your work in the world. So I'm glad to hear that you have practices, because it's so needed. It is so needed.
And there's actually a big misunderstanding about this, because when we want things, I want world peace, I want this. So then there's the steps between that, right?
Yes.
So we have to expand our embodiment of what we want before we're able to receive what we want.
Yes.
Right? So there's actually a bridge of expanding, integrating, contracting a little bit very often, expanding again.
Yes.
And I find that's a practice I work with my clients a lot, because if you're going for world peace or you're going for a really big vision, how do you grow your own self? How do you embody that your own self so that you can get there practically?
Yes. Even visionaries need practical, grounded steps, one at a time. And you made such a good point too, that when you step outside your comfort zone or you take some steps, that you have to integrate that learning or that expansion. And sometimes, and I notice in this life, I have a down day or I just need rest after the integration. Then when I am back after that, yes. And so it's this contraction expansion, or expansion contraction. And sometimes the contraction isn't as big of a deal, but I can feel the energy within me. And it's like, okay, this is one of those days where I'm just noticing things and chilling out because there's big things coming and I've done some big things. So yeah, I totally understand. And I'm so glad you're sharing this because it's so important in the work, especially if you're a visionary. There's a lot of visionaries who are still trudging along in the opposite direction of their North Star.
Well, I mean, that happens especially for people who are in my work, either love or charity. So purpose is what everyone understands. You know, you get work done, you just trudge along, make 100 sales calls, you'll get 10. It's this paradigm that's the only one that's understood. So if your way of getting things done is to fill yourself up so fully with love that you have raving fans and everyone around you gets bigger and better just because you're you. Or if you're charity and you can reach out to influencers and impact that ripple effect, you know, help those people because they have their own communities, their own ripple effect. And then what gets done is much bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And that first way, make 100 calls, won't work for you. If you're love, you need raving fans. If you're charity, you need to be connecting into your community and serving it. And so if you're doing it in a way that's not your way, life is hard, right? Because you're not organically working with your own self.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you have me think, okay, which in my eye, you know, because I can resonate with all of them. Do you have like an assessment that's available?
I have to remake an assessment.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, if
everyone loves an assessment, right? Because we all, and this is a blanket statement, but I think it's true. You can see what you think about this. We all want to be deeply acknowledged. And though we want others to deeply acknowledge us, what we're really wanting is for our own selves to see us. And I think these assessments help us see ourselves. It's like, and we just need that. Sometimes we need to see ourselves through somebody else's eyes because sometimes we can't see ourselves. But what I'm hearing is that you have this ability to really see people.
I really see people.
Yeah.
I really see people. And then I hold the space until they can see what I see.
Yeah,
that's what I do most profoundly.
That is a big deal, right? I mean, that is so important because so many people are so vacant with that acknowledgement. They don't have that. They're hungry for that. Yeah, it's a big deal.
And just to circle back around to loss for a second, when we experience a loss, we very often see ourselves or are told to see ourselves as broken rather than bruised. Now, here's the really interesting thing. The decisions that a broken person makes and the decisions that a whole person makes are very different.
Yes.
Right? So the work that I do is about having people see that they're whole and they're just coming back.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I just saw the movie A Star is Born last night. And I didn't cry. I was so surprised. I didn't get, I don't know. I think I was too busy looking at Lady Gaga and her natural beauty or something. And
I loved it.
Bradley Cooper's character was an alcoholic and he saw himself as broken. So his decisions came from that point where her decisions were she wasn't broken, and her decisions reflected that as well. I'm generalizing, but it's confirming with what you said. You know, it was just an example in the movie. There was a lot of profound things in the movie. The music was great, by the way. But you're
Oh, I
right.
loved it. Yeah.
Yeah. But you're right that there's this around loss. Loss is this taboo thing.
Yeah.
And what do you say? And how do you show up? And for the other person who has just experienced the loss. And when I experienced the loss of my parents, and I was with them when they died separately, they were divorced and everything. The biggest thing was that people rallied around me just to tell me that they loved me. And they showed up with food because I couldn't function very well, you know, and I was a mother of 2 young children at the time.
Yep.
So they didn't see me as broken. They just saw me as somebody who needed some love and support.
Yes.
And they didn't even have to say anything to me, really.
Yes.
And sometimes I think I made choices and requests from that broken because I wasn't clear. I'm not sure what I need, you know, because it's so hard. So having somebody like you, somebody that can really see you and help you clarify what it is that you need or how to be acknowledged. Well, yeah, it is profound.
Yeah, I mean, I started giving very specific feedback. So, you know, if someone said, "How are you?" my thought was, well, I'm looking forward to a wasteland without the husband that I loved for 25 years. How do you think I am? You know, it was that kind of response. Whereas if someone said, "How are you today? How are you right now?" that was actually a question I could answer. So specificity is really important. The other thing is that very often someone who has experienced a loss, a deep loss of any kind, they're not functioning very well. They don't necessarily know what they want. And so one of the recommendations that I made is that people talk to the person who's experienced the loss and listen, just listen. And then based on what they say, make a suggestion of something that you could do and ask if that's something they'd like. And then
That's
just
so simple. That's so simple, but mindful and kind.
Yep. And I actually had an example in real time of how this worked. My family supported me, so my rent was paid and things like that happened. The year after Dave died, my landlord said, "Where's the rent?" And I said, "Oh, it's been paid for." And she said, "No, not for this month. That was last month." So it's the 25th. I have no idea what I'm going to do. And my brain is not working. Like I'm getting notices from Con Ed. I'm getting notice because I'm not remembering to eat. I'm not remembering a lot of things. And I wrote a blog post called Grief, Brain, and Bills, which is on Bad Widow. Someone who was my freshman college roommate read the blog post and instant messaged me on Facebook and said, "I'll pay your March rent." And I said, "You do know I live in New York. Feel free to bow out, because my rent is not small here." And I told her what it was, and she said, "I'm not bowing out, I'm paying it." And within 30 minutes, someone I had not seen for 25 years paid my rent. And so that's an example. And I said, "Oh my God, that was so incredible." And she said, "I read what you wrote. I saw what you needed, and I just did what you said." I mean, it still brings tears to my eyes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's really practical.
I love it. So, but I want to get us back to this leading with personal power, because I always talk about that there's a lot of something mores. Like we talked about you knowing there was something more, and ignoring that was like a slow death. There's often so many different types of something mores. There's the big ones that pulls us towards that vision. And then we can always sense there might be something more even in this moment. And then there's that unique quality that we have that is our personal essence, or what I also call a little something more that you have that perhaps I don't have. And that runs through your entire life, even when you weren't honoring your big vision, but you still had that. So what is that for you, Alison? That unique something more, that essence that makes you you and different from others?
So I have, since I was a child, been very, I would call it quixotic, tilting at windmills. I things that are not just make me literally crazy. I mean, I start working to fix them. If I can't fix them, I'll break them to fix them. I'm charity people typically are really terrible employees. I love to work, but I can see in almost any system where people aren't being empowered, where people aren't supported, where things are not working, and I want to make it happen. And if I don't have the autonomy to make it happen, I get very distressed. And I've been that way since I was a child.
Yes. I just saw in my mind's eye, like this tornado, you as a tornado, and going there to like see what's going on. And if it's not working or whole or honoring of life, that you kind of stir it up and get things reassessed and restructured. And then you go off somewhere else. Like that just came into my mind, that's you. Yeah.
Well, that's how Bad Widow came to be. The conversations around loss and the conversations around being whole or being broken are broken. And so I will make them right. I can be quite in your face about it, because if it's really broken, then there's not a little fix that's going to make it change. So sometimes there needs to be a tornado effect when something is really, really not working. And there are a lot of conversations in our world at the moment that are not working. Mm-hmm. And my passion is if people knew that they were whole, if they were all living into fully who they were, then what it would do is it would mean that they would know that they're fully supported all the time. There's no lack. Mm-hmm. There's no broken. At that point, you can unleash all the creative, all the visionary, all of that into the world, and we could solve all of the problems of the world lickety-split if people just knew that they were fine, that they're not broken, that they're whole.
And I agree with you. And supporting people to see and experience themselves as whole can be a big excavation work.
Yes.
I mean, it's been for me. You know, I always used to say, I want to have like a self-cleaning oven method. Like, I just want to put me in somewhere and come out and get rid of all the subconscious beliefs, all the karmic stuff. And sometimes it's been like that. But again, being a human in this body, there's steps to take. And at this point, although I'm still going for the self-cleaning oven method, but you're right. We are all whole. I mean, I'm a certified coach. And so, you know, when I work with people, I can see through the charade that they're living. But I also have compassion because I also still have tidbits of my charade, the things that are not true. So I totally get what you're saying. And we all are whole. And there wouldn't be any problems if we lived in that wholeness. And it goes back to what we were talking about, that deep acknowledgement.
Yes. When
we can really see each other as that whole being that we are, then there's less of that power struggle, conflict. There's less challenge. This is really important work. It's important to hear what you have to say about loss and the possibilities of choice come from experiencing yourself as broken or just having a time where you need support, that you're just, what you said, bruised. Yeah.
Yes. Bruised.
Yeah. So
not broken.
Share with us how we can learn more about you and your work.
So I have two websites. I have badwidow.com, which nobody ever asks me how to spell, and affluencecode.com. And if you go either of those places, you can find me. I'm on all the mediums, basically.
Okay, so all social media. And so what is the difference between the two?
So Affluence Code is more focused on the three lenses, and the Bad Widow is frankly more robust because I've been spending a lot more time on it. That goes into the loss and the grief and the brokenness, and I offer a resilient spirit breakthrough call. So if someone actually wants to talk to me, they can go and schedule a complimentary call there as well.
Okay. So I'll put your link in the show notes. Someone needs to speak with you about how to show up in the world from a whole perspective, especially going through loss, they can reach out to you and learn more about you. And it sounds like what you've written about is also very supportive and healing for those going through loss.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And,
lots of resources.
Okay, great. So go check out Alison's website. I had so much fun interviewing Alison that I forgot to ask her about the 3 visionary qualities that she recommends for other women. So here they are. The first one is to have an infinite commitment to fairness and kindness. The second one is to see people truly for who they are in their wholeness and hold space for them to see and own it too. And the third one is to be fiercely loyal and loving, whether it looks like a hug or a kick out of self-pity into powerful self-expression. Yeah, and if you're a visionary and you want your vision to come to life and you need support in that, please feel free to reach out to me. That link will also be in the notes below. And that is it for today. I want to thank you so much, Alison, for being here today on the Visionary Voice. Your journey is bringing such value to all of us.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So till next time, we say goodbye.